Hey guys, tonight we're riding into the season the dime novels always forget. We're heading into the heart of a cowboy's greatest and most unglamorous battle. Not a gunfight at high noon, not a showdown with a fearsome outlaw, but a long, slow and desperate war against an enemy that cannot be shot, reasoned with, or outrun. Tonight, we're talking about winter. We're going to explore how these iconic figures of the open range, men who often had no house to call a home, survived the brutal, killing cold of a frontier winter, armed with little more than a thin bedroll, a stubborn horse, and a profound, quiet endurance you have to see to believe. So, before you settle in for this chilly tale, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet explorations into the gritty realities of the past. Your support is what makes this all possible. And, as always, I love to know who I'm sharing this story with. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, pull a blanket up a little higher. Let the warmth of your own room be a comfort. And let's journey back to a time when a man's only home was the one he could carry on his back, and the coming of the first snow was a death sentence waiting to be signed. The trail drive is over. The last of the cattle have been sold and loaded onto the eastbound trains. The wild, frantic, and brief celebration in the cow town is a fading memory. A dull ache in your head, and a profound emptiness in your pocket. The 3 months of wages you earned through dust and sweat have been spent on cheap whiskey, a new hat, and a few fleeting moments of purchased companionship. And now, a new reality is setting in, a reality that is colder and harder than any trail boss. The air has a new, sharp edge to it. The nights are drawing in, long and cold. The wind, which was once your constant, dusty companion, now has teeth. Winter is coming. For the cowboy, the end of the trail drive season is the end of steady work. The great moving machine of the cattle industry shuts down for the winter. The outfits break up, the men scatter, and you are faced with a stark and terrifying choice. What do you do now? You have no home to return to. You are a transient, a drifter. Your only skills are riding a horse and throwing a rope. These are not skills that are in high demand in a town that is about to be buried in snow. Some of the cowboys, the ones with a bit of luck or a bit of foresight, will head south to Texas or Arizona, where the winters are milder and there might be work on a year-round ranch. But that requires money for travel, money you do not have. Some will try to find work in the town. They will sweep out the saloon, or muck out the livery stable, or take any menial job they can find to earn enough to pay for a cheap room in a boarding house. They will trade the open range for a life of drudgery and quiet desperation. And some will do what you are about to do. You will sign on for the hardest, loneliest, and most dangerous job in the entire cattle industry. You will become a line rider. A massive cattle corporation, one of the new, Eastern-owned outfits that are taking over the West, needs men to winter with their herds. The cattle will not be driven. They will be left to graze on a vast, unfenced portion of the winter range. And they need men to watch over them, to keep them from straying too far, to protect them from predators. You meet with the ranch foreman. He is not a cowboy. He is a businessman. He looks at you, at your worn-out clothes and your broke, desperate face. He knows he has you. He offers you the job. $15 a month, less than half what you earned on the trail drive, and you will not be paid until the spring. You will be working on credit, your life, a down payment on a future, and uncertain wage. Here's a bleak fringe fact about the economics of the cowboy. While the trail drivers of the peak era could earn decent wages, the thousands of cowboys who worked as regular ranch hands, especially during the off-season, were among the lowest paid laborers in America. Their lives were a constant cycle of seasonal work and winter unemployment, a precarious existence that kept them perpetually poor and dependent on the large cattle companies. The foreman tells you what the job entails. You will be assigned a stretch of territory, a line that is perhaps 50 miles long. You will be given a one-room cabin, a line shack, and enough basic supplies to last you for a month at a time. Your job is to ride that line, every day, all winter long, alone. It is a sentence of solitary confinement on a scale that is almost impossible to imagine. You will see another human being perhaps once a month, when the grub line rider comes to bring you fresh supplies. The rest of the time your only companions will be your horse, the cattle, and the vast, crushing silence of the winter prairie. You take the job. You have no choice. The alternative is to become a winter drifter, a man with no job, no shelter, who will likely freeze to death in a back alley or be arrested for vagrancy. You are given your supplies: a sack of flour, a slab of bacon, some beans, coffee, and a box of ammunition. You are given a few spare horses. And you are given a map, a crude drawing of the territory that is now your prison. You ride out from the main ranch headquarters. You watch as the buildings, the corrals, the last vestiges of human civilization disappear behind you. You ride for 2 days into a landscape that becomes progressively more empty, more silent, more intimidating. Finally, you find it, your home for the winter. It is not a cabin, it is a dugout, a hole dug into the side of a small hill, with a front wall made of sod and a roof of mud and grass. It is little more than an animal's den. Inside, there is a crude bunk, a small rusty stove, and a dirt floor. The air is cold and damp, and smells of earth and old sorrows. You unpack your meager supplies. You build a fire in the stove. You sit on the edge of your bunk and you listen. But there is nothing to hear. Only the sound of the wind, a low, mournful sigh across the empty land. The sun sets, and a darkness that is deeper and more absolute than any you have ever known descends. You are 100 miles from the nearest town. You are 50 miles from the nearest human being. You are utterly, completely, and terrifyingly alone. The myth of the cowboy is one of freedom, of camaraderie, of a life lived under a wide open sky. But you have just begun to live the hidden chapter of that myth, the chapter of the winter, a story of isolation, of endurance, and of a cold that can freeze not just a man's body, but his soul. Your single most important possession in this new, frozen world is not your horse, not your rifle, not even your coffee pot. It is your bedroll. It is your home, your fortress against the cold, your nightly refuge. And learning its secrets is the first and most crucial lesson in the science of winter survival. It is not a sleeping bag. It is a system, a carefully layered and deeply personal piece of technology. The heart of the system is the blankets. You have 3. They are made of heavy, coarse wool. They are not soft. They smell faintly of damp sheep and wood smoke. But wool has a magical property. It insulates even when it's wet. This is a fact that will save your life. The soul of the system is the canvas tarp. It is a large, heavy sheet of canvas that has been treated with linseed oil or wax to make it waterproof, or at least water-resistant. The cowboys call it a tarp, a slicker, or more poetically, a canvas and wool coffin. Making your bed is not a casual affair. It is a deliberate and vital ritual that you perform every single night. First, you choose your spot. You look for a place that is as sheltered from the wind as possible. In the lee of a small hill, in a thicket of brush, even in a shallow ditch, you kick away the snow. You lay down a base of dry grass or pine boughs if you can find them, to create a layer of insulation between you and the frozen ground. Then, you lay out your tarp. You fold it in half, creating a large envelope. Inside this envelope, you create your cocoon of blankets. The first blanket is folded in half and laid inside the tarp. The second is laid on top of it. The third, your thickest and warmest, is your top cover. You have now created a canvas and wool sleeping bag, but the ritual is not over. You undress. This seems like madness. The air temperature is below 0. The wind is a physical blow, but the old-timers have taught you this strange piece of wisdom. You do not sleep in the clothes you have worn all day. They are damp with your sweat, and that dampness will chill you to the bone during the night. You strip down to your long wool underwear. You fold your clothes, your denim trousers, your flannel shirt, and you place them inside the bedroll with you, between the layers of blankets. Your own body heat will dry them out by morning. It is your personal and only laundry service. Then you get in. You slide into your canvas cocoon, pulling the layers of wool up to your chin. You fold the top flap of the tarp over your head, leaving only a small opening to breathe through. You are now in your sanctuary. The world outside is a frozen hell of wind and darkness. But inside your small, self-made cave of canvas and wool, it is surprisingly warm. Your own body heat is trapped by the layers of wool, reflected back at you. The waterproof tarp keeps out the snow and the wind. Here's a peculiar fringe fact from the material science of the West. The quality of a cowboy's bedroll was a significant status symbol. A man with a thick, high-quality wool blanket and a well-oiled tarp was seen as a professional. a man who invested in his own survival. A man with a thin, ragged bedroll was seen as a greenhorn or a drifter, a man who was not long for this world. But sleep is not a guaranteed comfort. You must still contend with the realities of the frozen ground. The cold seeps up from the earth, a relentless, patient enemy. You learn to sleep on your side, curled into a tight ball, to minimize your contact with the ground. You learn to use your saddle as a pillow and a windbreak, and you are never truly comfortable. The ground is hard. A rock digs into your back. Your breath condenses on the inside of the tarp and freezes, showering you with a fine, cold dust of ice every time you move. And then there are the nights when it goes wrong. A sudden, violent blizzard buries you in your sleep. You wake up to the terrifying pressure of 2 feet of snow on top of your tarp. You must fight your way out, digging through the heavy, suffocating snow, your heart pounding with a primal, claustrophobic fear. Or a sudden thaw, followed by a hard freeze, turns the ground into a sheet of ice. Your bedroll becomes a cold, slippery, and miserable island in a world of frozen mud. Or your tarp, which is old and worn, finally springs a leak. A trickle of melting snow finds its way into your cocoon. The water soaks your blankets. The wool still insulates, but the damp, chilling cold is a miserable companion. You spend the rest of the night shivering, your teeth chattering, praying for dawn. You learn that your bedroll is not just a piece of equipment, it is your partner in survival. You care for it with a devotion that is almost religious. You dry it out in the sun whenever you can. You patch its holes with a needle and thread. You guard it with your life. Because you know that this simple, unglamorous roll of canvas and wool is the only thing that stands between you and a very quiet, very cold, and very lonely death. It is your canvas coffin, yes. But it is also your canvas womb, the one small, warm place where you can be reborn every morning into the harsh, beautiful, and unforgiving light of a winter dawn. In the mythology of the West, the cowboy's costume is an iconic symbol of freedom and rugged individualism. The wide-brimmed hat, the denim jeans, the leather chaps, the high-heeled boots. But in the brutal reality of a frontier winter, fashion is a suicidal luxury. Your clothing is not a statement, it is a science. A desperate and often failing science of staying warm. Your life is a constant, intimate battle against the cold. And your only armor is a few, precious layers of wool, cotton, and leather. The foundation of your winter uniform is your underwear. It is not the soft, comfortable garment of the modern world. It is a one-piece union suit, made of heavy, scratchy, and often off-white wool. It covers you from your neck to your wrists and your ankles. It has a button up front and a deeply inconvenient drop seat in the back. It is itchy, it is bulky, it smells faintly of wet dog, even when it's clean, and you almost never take it off. You will live in this same union suit for weeks or even months at a time. It is your second skin, your primary layer of defense against the cold. Over this, you wear a flannel shirt. It is thick and soft, and probably the most comfortable garment you own. It is likely a dark, practical color, like blue or grey, or a bold plaid pattern. Then comes the vest. A simple woolen vest is a surprisingly effective piece of insulation. It keeps your core warm, which is the key to keeping the rest of your body from freezing. Your trousers are made of either heavy wool or a thick, durable canvas known as duck. Denim jeans exist, but they are not the soft, fashionable pants of today. They are stiff, raw, and unforgiving. And when they get wet, they freeze solid, turning into a pair of icy, leg-shaped prisons. Wool is a much better and much warmer option. Over all of this, you wear your coat. A good winter coat is a cowboy's most prized possession after his saddle. It might be a heavy, blanket-lined Mackinaw coat or a sheepskin with the thick fleece turned inward. It is bulky, it is heavy, and it is your primary shield against the wind. And then there are the extremities, the parts of your body that are the first to surrender to the cold. Your hat is not just a symbol of your profession, it is an essential piece of survival gear. A good, high-quality, felt hat is surprisingly warm and waterproof. It keeps the snow off your head and the heat in. To lose your hat in a winter storm is a life-threatening emergency. Your gloves are a constant source of frustration. You have a pair of thick, leather work gloves, but they are clumsy and make it difficult to do any detailed work, like saddling a horse or firing a rifle. You might have a second, thinner pair of woolen gloves for such tasks. But your hands are almost always cold, your fingers stiff and clumsy. Frostbite is a constant, nagging worry. And your boots? They are high-heeled, leather, and designed for riding, not for walking in deep snow. They are not insulated. They are not waterproof. They are, in fact, a terrible piece of winter footwear. You try to make them warmer by stuffing them with straw or wearing multiple pairs of thick woolen socks. But your feet are almost always cold and often wet. You learn to live with the sensation of having 2 blocks of ice at the end of your legs. Here's a practical fringe fact about surviving the cold. The single greatest danger in winter is not the cold itself, but the moisture. Sweat, melting snow, a step into a half-frozen creek any of these can get your clothes wet, and a wet layer of clothing will suck the heat from your body with a terrifying efficiency. Staying dry is the central and most difficult challenge of winter survival. You are engaged in a constant, and often losing, battle with dampness. You sweat from the hard work of chopping wood or riding a difficult horse. The sweat soaks into your woolen underwear. At night, that dampness turns cold and clammy against your skin. You try to dry your clothes by the small, sputtering fire in your line shack. You hang your socks, your gloves, your shirt on a makeshift line near the stove. The cabin fills with the smell of wet wool and your own unwashed body. But your clothes are never truly dry. They are just less wet. And then there is the problem of layering. You are wearing so many bulky, restrictive layers that simple movements become difficult. Saddling your horse is an awkward, clumsy ballet. Getting dressed and undressed is a 5-minute ordeal. You are a walking, bundled up, and slightly smelly onion of wool and leather. You look at the illustrations in the magazines from the East. They show people skating in elegant, tailored coats, their faces rosy and cheerful. It seems like a different species of human, a different kind of winter. Your winter is not elegant. It is a clumsy, itchy, and perpetually damp struggle. Your clothing is not a fashion statement. It is a flawed and often failing piece of armor. But it is the only armor you have. And so you pull your collar tighter, you tuck your trousers into your boots, and you pull your hat down low. You wrap yourself in your layers of wool, and you step out into the wind, a solitary, bundled figure, ready to face another day in your long, cold, and deeply uncomfortable war against the elements. In the summer, on the trail drive, food was a communal affair, a ritual governed by the rhythms of the chuck wagon and the grumpy tyranny of the cook. In the frozen solitude of your winter line shack, food becomes a lonely, repetitive, and deeply personal struggle. You are your own cook now. And your kitchen is a small, rusty, wood-burning stove and a single, all-purpose cast-iron pot. Your pantry is a small, wooden crate that contains your monthly rations. A sack of flour, a slab of bacon, a bag of pinto beans, a tin of coffee, and a block of salt. This is the holy trinity of your winter diet, the same monotonous foundation that fueled the trail drive. But here, in the silence of your own company, it takes on a new and more desperate quality. Your day begins with coffee. You grind the beans with the butt of your pistol, a familiar, comforting ritual. You boil the grounds in your pot, creating a thick, gritty, and incredibly bitter brew. It is not a pleasure, it is a necessity. It is the fuel that gets your frozen body moving in the morning. Breakfast is bacon and biscuits. You fry a few slices of the fatty, salt-cured bacon in your skillet. The smell fills your small cabin, a brief, beautiful moment of sensory pleasure in an otherwise grey world. You make your biscuits from a simple sourdough starter that you must keep alive through the winter, feeding it with flour and water, protecting it from the cold like a fragile, living pet. The biscuits are heavy and dense, and you use them to sop up every last precious drop of the bacon grease. Lunch, if you have it, is a cold biscuit eaten in the saddle while you ride your line. Dinner is the main event. It is a slow-simmered stew cooked in your one-iron pot. The base of the stew is always the same, beans. You boil them for hours, until they are a soft, mushy, and largely flavourless paste. Into this paste, you add whatever else you have. A chunk of bacon, a handful of flour for thickening, and, if you are lucky, some meat. You are expected to supplement your rations by hunting. Your rifle is not just for defense, it is a tool for survival. You spend a good part of your day tracking the small game of the winter prairie. Rabbits, squirrels, prairie dogs. You become a patient and a deadly hunter. You learn to read the tracks in the snow. You learn to sit for hours, perfectly still, in the freezing cold, waiting for a single clean shot. A fresh rabbit is a cause for celebration. It is a rare and precious taste of something other than salt and grease. You skin it carefully, saving the pelt to patch your mittens or line your boots. You butcher it, and you put every last piece of it into the iron pot. Nothing is wasted. The meat, the organs, the boneset all goes into the stew, adding a richness and a flavour that feels like the height of luxury. Here's a stark fringe fact about the diet of the solitary frontiersman. Caloric intake was a matter of life and death. A man doing hard labour in extreme cold could burn up to 60 calories a day. The diet, while monotonous and nutritionally poor, was incredibly high in fat and calories. Grease was not just a flavouring, it was the primary source of the energy needed to fight off the cold. But there are weeks when the hunting is poor. The animals are scarce, hunkered down against the cold, and your diet shrinks back to the grim reality of your rations. Beans and bacon. Bacon and beans. The monotony is a form of psychological torture. You begin to have vivid, detailed dreams about food. You dream of your mother's apple pie. You dream of a juicy steak. You dream of a simple, fresh green salad. You wake up with the ghost of these flavours in your mouth, and the reality of another plate of beans is a small daily heartbreak. You become resourceful. You learn the edible plants of the winter landscape, the frozen rose hips that can be brewed into a sour, vitamin C-rich tea, the inner bark of the pine tree, which can be ground into a kind of flour to extend your rations. You are engaged in a constant, and often desperate, calculation. How much food do you have left? How long must it last? The arrival of the grubline rider, with his fresh supplies, is the most important date on your calendar. You ration your food to make it last until his visit, and you pray that he is not delayed by a storm. One winter he is. A blizzard traps him at the main ranch for an extra 2 weeks. Your rations run out. For 5 days you eat nothing but a thin, watery broth made from boiled flour and salt. The hunger is a physical pain, a hollow, grinding ache in your gut. Your body weakens. Your mind becomes foggy. When the grubline rider finally arrives, you are so weak you can barely stand. He takes one look at your gaunt face and your hollow eyes, and he gives you a piece of his own jerky. The taste of the dried, salty meat is so intense, so overwhelmingly delicious, that you almost weep. You have survived. You realize that food in this world is not about pleasure, or culture, or community. It is about the simple, brutal, and unforgiving mathematics of survival. It is about the calories needed to keep your internal furnace burning against the relentless, killing cold. You sit by your fire, eating your simple meal of rabbit stew. It is not a gourmet feast, but it is hot, it is real, and it is enough to get you through another long, cold, and lonely night. The physical dangers of your winter exile are obvious, a trinity of primal fears etched into the human spirit. The cold, the hunger, the predators. The cold is a patient assassin, a constant pressure against the thin membranes of skin and shelter, always searching for a crack, a moment of inattention, to slip its icy fingers inside and still your heart. You have learned its ways, how it stalks the pre-dawn hours and rides the back of the north wind. Hunger is a duller beast, a gnawing emptiness that hollows you out from the inside, turning your thoughts to gristle and marrow. You have learned to bargain with it, to ration, to hunt, to endure the long, lean days. The predators, the lean, grey wolves with their intelligent eyes, and the silent, stalking mountain Qatari ghosts on the periphery, a reminder that you are not the only hunter here, that you are also meat. You have managed these threats, held them at bay through a combination of vigilance, routine, and a stubborn refusal to die. But there is another, more subtle, and perhaps more terrifying, enemy. It is not a creature of flesh and blood, nor a simple absence of warmth or food. It is the landscape itself. It is the vast, silent, and blindingly white world that surrounds you, an empire of snow and sky that stretches to every horizon. It is an enemy that does not attack, but simply is. Its weapon is its own immensity, its terrible, unending, and profound emptiness. At first, the snow is a thing of grace, a benediction. You remember the day it came, after weeks of a dead, brown world. The prairie was a corpse, brittle and drained of all colour, the grasses rattling in the wind like old bones. You awoke one morning to a profound silence, a stillness so complete it felt like the world was holding its breath. The light filtering through your cabin's single, grimy window was different soft, pearlescent, and pure. You pushed open the heavy plank door and stood in awe. A soft, silent curtain had fallen overnight, transforming the drab, dead prairie into a world of clean, pristine white. Every sharp edge was softened, every imperfection buried. The gnarled fence posts wore thick white caps, and the skeletal remains of last summer's sagebrush were draped in ermine. It was a baptism, a scouring of the old world, a promise of a fresh start. It was a thing of sublime and silent wonder. But wonder, like warmth, is a fleeting commodity in this land. It is a currency the winter quickly spends. The awe soon curdles, replaced by a deep and unsettling sense of unease that begins in the pit of your stomach and creeps upward into your thoughts. The snow erases the world you know. It is a thief of memory and place. It buries the game trails you had painstakingly learned, the familiar paths worn into the earth by deer and your own horse. It hides the landmarks, the lightning-scarred cottonwood, the peculiar outcropping of red rock, the shallow depression of a dry creek bed. It smooths away the familiar contours of the land, the subtle rises and falls that once spoke to you of direction and distance. The world becomes a blank, featureless, and profoundly disorienting canvas. The beauty has not vanished, but it has revealed its other face, a mask of utter indifference. To get lost in this white emptiness is to die. It is not a dramatic, sudden end, but a slow, quiet surrender. You have imagined it, a waking nightmare that visits you in the lonely hours. The frantic, stumbling search for a lost trail, the heart-hammering panic as every direction looks the same, the draining of energy, the sweat that freezes on your skin, the creeping, insidious numbness that begins in your fingers and toes, the final, exhausted collapse into a drift, the landscape pulling a soft, cold blanket over you, the last sight, the swirling, indifferent flakes against a white sky. The fear of such a death is a cold stone in your gut. You ride your line every day, a long, looping patrol of your territory. It is a daily act of navigation and nerve, a ritual that holds the encroaching chaos at bay. You are not guided by a map or a compass. Such tools are useless in a world that has no fixed points. You are guided by a deep, intuitive knowledge of the land, a mental map that you have built in your own head, piece by painstaking piece. It is a map not of lines, but of feelings and whispers. You learn to read the subtle signs that the snow cannot completely erase. The shape of a distant, snow-covered butte, how its western face is scoured clean by the wind, while its eastern slope holds a deep drift. The direction of the prevailing wind, revealed by the pattern of the sastrugi, the wave-like frozen ripples carved into the surface of the snow. You learn to read them, as a mariner reads the waves. The position of the weak winter sun, a pale, useless coin in the vast sky, offers little warmth but serves as a crucial, celestial marker, its low arc a constant reminder of east and west. Your life is a daily exercise in this subtle, intensive literacy. But sometimes, the world decides to wipe the slate clean. A white-out blizzard descends. It does not arrive with the dramatic fury of a summer thunderstorm. It creeps in. The horizon, already a vague suggestion, dissolves completely. The pale disk of the sun vanishes. The sky and the land merge into a single, swirling and impenetrable wall of white. You cannot see the ears of your own horse. You cannot see your own outstretched hand. Your sense of direction, so carefully honed, vanishes in an instant. The world is gone. You are adrift in a sea of white darkness, an experience so disorienting it borders on the mystical. The vertigo is overwhelming. You feel as if you could fall up into the sky or sink down into the earth. In these moments, your life depends entirely on your horse. The animal, a sturdy roan with a calm and steady heart, becomes your entire world. You loosen the reins, you give it its head. You lean forward and whisper into its ear, your words snatched away by the screaming wind. You trust its instincts, its mysterious internal compass that is tuned to a frequency you cannot perceive. And you pray. You pray that it knows the way home. The feeling of helplessness is absolute, a complete and total surrender of will. You are a blind man, being led by a blind animal, through a world that has no features, no up, no down, no existence beyond the howling vortex immediately around you. The only reality is the straining muscles of the horse beneath you, and the frozen leather of the reins in your hands. The visual disorientation is not the only danger. there is also the threat of snow blindness, a more intimate and agonizing assault. After days of traveling across the endless, sun-drenched snowfields, your eyes begin to protest. The world becomes a mirror, reflecting the sun's glare with a relentless, punishing intensity. It is a form of torture by light. You experience it once, and the memory is branded onto your soul. It begins subtly, with a gritty, sandy feeling in your eyes, as if you've been caught in a dust storm. You rub them, but the irritation only worsens. Then, the pain starts. It is not a dull ache, but a sharp, searing pain, as if hot needles are being pushed deep into your eyeballs. Every blink is a fresh wave of agony. Your vision begins to blur. The sharp, crystalline world is seen through a watery, painful haze. And then, caught miles from your cabin, you go effectively blind. The brilliant white landscape dissolves into a single, unbearable sheet of white-hot pain. Here's a painful fringe fact from the annals of exploration, a piece of knowledge you learn in the most brutal way possible. Snow blindness is a real and incredibly painful condition, a form of sunburn on the corneas. It was a common affliction for Arctic explorers, mountain climbers, and anyone who had to spend long periods of time in a snow-covered environment. The only treatment was to rest in a dark place for several days, your eyes bandaged, and wait for the delicate tissues to heal. The pain is so intense you can barely stay in the saddle. You are a wounded animal, desperate and sightless. You must rely on your horse to save you. With fumbling, clumsy fingers, you tie your bandana tightly over your burning eyes, shutting out the last vestiges of the torturous light. You give the horse its freedom, slumping forward in the saddle, and you hold on, a helpless passenger on a desperate journey. The horse, with its strange, unerring sense of direction, brings you home. You don't know how long it takes. Time dissolves into a rhythm of agonizing heartbeats and the steady plod of hooves. When the horse finally stops, you nearly fall from the saddle. You stumble into the familiar darkness of your cabin and collapse onto your bunk, a low moan escaping your lips. You spend the next 3 days in a world of absolute, agonizing darkness. You swathe your eyes in damp, cool cloths, changing them when they grow warm from the fever in your head. You lie there, listening to the sounds of the world, the wind, the creak of the logs, the scuttling of a mouse, and wait for your sight to return. The fear that it won't is a constant, terrifying companion. The experience leaves you with a profound and abiding fear of the white, sunlit landscape. You fashion a pair of crude snow goggles from a piece of leather with thin slits to see through, and you never ride without them again. The world seen through those slits is diminished, constrained, but it is safe. But the greatest danger of this white world is not to your body, but to your mind. It is the psychological toll of the sensory deprivation, a slow, grinding erosion of the self. For weeks on end, the world is nothing but white and grey. The sky is a lid of flat white cloud. The ground is an endless blanket of white snow. The air itself is often a thick, grey fog that clings to everything. There is no colour, there is no variety. There is only the endless, monotonous, and soul-crushing sameness. Your mind, starved of stimulation, begins to create its own. It is a desperate act of self-preservation that quickly becomes a new form of torment. You begin to see things. A dark shape on the horizon that you watch for an hour, your heart pounding, convinced it is a bear or a lone rider, only to finally realize it is just a rock, its shadow elongated by the low sun. You see a flicker of movement at the edge of your vision that is just the wind, blowing a skiff of loose snow across a drift. But for a split second, it was a wolf, a man, a threat. You begin to hear things. The silence is not empty. It is a canvas for the sounds of your own unraveling mind. The wind, moaning in the eaves of your cabin, begins to sound like a voice, a low, mournful whisper that seems to be speaking your name. The howl of a distant wolf, a sound that once filled you with a wild and lonely respect, now sounds like a woman weeping, a sound of inconsolable grief that plucks at the strings of your own buried sorrows. This is cabin fever, prairie madness. The old-timers spoke of it in hushed tones. It is the slow, creeping unraveling of a mind that has been left alone for too long in a world of white and silence. It is the breakdown of the boundary between the inner world and the outer world, until the landscape you see is merely a reflection of the landscape of your own soul. You fight it with a desperate, disciplined effort. It is a battle waged in silence. within the fortress of your own skull. You talk to yourself, your voice a rough, unfamiliar sound in the stillness. You sing old songs, your pitch wavering, but the vibration of your own vocal cords is a reassurance of your physical existence. You create rigid routines and cling to them like a drowning man to a raft. You focus on the small, tangible details of your life. The rough texture of the wood you are chopping, the sharp, clean scent of the pine, the bitter, welcome taste of your morning coffee, the heavy, reassuring feel of your wool blanket. These small sensory anchors are all that keep you from drifting away. You are engaged in a battle for your own sanity, a battle against the white darkness that is trying to swallow you whole. You stand at the small, grimy window of your cabin, looking out at the endless, empty, and achingly beautiful landscape. It is a world that is capable of killing you in 100 different ways. It can freeze you, it can starve you, it can blind you, it can drive you mad. But as you stare into that vast white heart, you understand the most dangerous thing it can do. It can make you forget that you are human. It can erase your mind as surely as it erases the trails in the snow, smoothing over the contours of your personality, burying your memories, your hopes, your sorrows under a blanket of profound and silent indifference. It can swallow your soul and turn you into just another silent, frozen feature of its vast, white, and terrible beauty. Not every cowboy spends the winter in the profound, mind-breaking solitude of a line shack. The vast, silent theatre of the white darkness is a trial reserved for the few. Some are lucky enough, or perhaps unlucky enough, to be assigned to the main ranch headquarters. Here, you trade the existential terror of isolation for a different and often more viscerally irritating kind of hell, the bunkhouse. It is a transition from a battle against the vast, indifferent emptiness of nature to a constant, grinding war of attrition against the suffocating presence of other men. The bunkhouse is a long, low wooden building, more a container for men than a home. It is constructed of rough-hewn logs, chinked with a mixture of mud and moss that does a poor job of keeping the wind at bay. It is one large room, a human warehouse filled with a dozen or more crude, tiered wooden bunks that line the walls like open-shelved catacombs. A formidable, pot-bellied stove, stained with rust and the ghosts of 1,000 spilled coffee cups, squats in the center, its chimney pipe rising precariously through the ceiling. The air inside is a thick, permanent and deeply complex miasma, a layered olfactory history of unwashed men, sweat-soaked wool drying by the stove, stale tobacco smoke that has seeped into the very grain of the wood, and the damp, earthy smell of leather and horse. This is your home, and your roommates are a collection of the toughest, grumpiest, and most profoundly bored men in the West. They are men who have been hardened by the sun, wind, and trail, their faces, maps of hardship, their hands gnarled and calloused into tools. They are men of few words and many unspoken rules, and you must learn to navigate their world or be broken by it. The primary, inescapable feature of bunkhouse life is a complete and utter lack of privacy. It is a concept that simply does not exist here. You sleep, you eat, you dress, you dream, you live in a space smaller than a modern suburban garage with 12 other men. Every sound is public property. You know the saw-like rasp of Old Man Hemlock's snore, a sound that seems to shake the very foundations of the building. You know the rhythm of the young Texan's nervous cough, the particular and inventive string of curses the foreman, a man named Blackwood, mutters when he stubs his toe in the pre-dawn darkness. You learn to distinguish the scent of each man's cheap tobacco, the way one man's boots creak while another's are silent. There are no secrets, no private moments. Every act is witnessed, every weakness noted and filed away. The social hierarchy of the bunkhouse is as rigid and unforgiving as a winter-frozen river. It is a complex calculus based on a combination of age, years of experience on the range, and a pure, intimidating toughness that radiates from a man like heat from the stove. The top bunks, which are warmer as the heat rises, belong to the older, more respected handsmen who have survived stampedes, blizzards, and gunfights, and carry the quiet authority of those who have seen it all. The bottom bunks, colder and closer to the drafty floor where mice skitter in the night, belong to the younger men like yourself. The best spot, the undisputed territory of the ranch foreman, Blackwood, is the bunk closest to the stove. It is his throne, and from it, he presides over his small, restless kingdom with a gaze that misses nothing. To challenge this order, even accidentally, is to invite a swift and brutal correction. The day is a rigid routine of hard, cold, and often pointless-seeming work. You rise before the sun, the air in the bunkhouse frigid until the stove is roaring. You mend fences whose posts have been heaved up by the frost. You chop endless cords of firewood for the main house, the rhythmic thud of your axe a lonely drumbeat in the frozen air. You tend to the horses, their warm breath misting around you in the barn, a brief respite from the human friction of the bunkhouse. The work is designed not just to maintain the ranch, but to serve a more critical purpose, to keep a dozen bored, irritable, and potentially violent men from turning on each other. It is a way to burn off the restless energy, to tire the body so the mind has less time to brood. But the days are short in the winter, the sun a brief visitor, and the evenings are long, vast oceans of time that must be crossed. This is when the real challenge of bunkhouse life begins. The challenge of boredom. Boredom in the bunkhouse is a palpable, almost physical presence. It is a thick, heavy, and dangerous fog that fills the room after the evening meal of beans and salt pork. It seeps into the corners, dulls the light from the kerosene lamps, and weighs down the spirit. It is in this fog that resentments fester and tempers fray, and the men fight it with a variety of strange and often self-destructive rituals. The first, and most common, is gambling. Poker, faro, monte the games are spread out on overturned crates, the players illuminated in flickering lamplight. A deck of cards, worn soft and greasy with use, is a way to pass the long dark hours. It is a source of drama, of whispered strategy, of the fleeting, electric hope of winning a few extra dollars to be spent on whiskey the next time the supply wagon comes through. But the games are not friendly. They are tense, serious affairs, played in a cloud of smoke and low muttering. A man's skill at cards is seen as a measure of his intelligence, his nerve, his ability to read other men, and a dispute over a hander suspected cheat. A misread bet can easily escalate into a sudden explosion of violence. A chair scrapes back, a table is overturned, and fists fly. You learn to play, your meager wages clutched in your hand, but you also learn the more important skills. How to lose gracefully, how to read the mood of the table, and when to fold your hand and walk away. The second defense against the encroaching fog is storytelling. The older cowboys are living libraries of tall tales, of myths, of legends. After the card games have ended, or when the mood is right, one of them will begin to speak, his voice low and raspy. They tell stories of stampedes so large they blotted out the sun for a day, of outlaws so cunning they could disappear into thin air, of ghostly riders who haunt the lonely plains, forever searching for a lost herd. They speak of encounters with strange beasts, of winters even colder than this one, of feats of horsemanship that defy belief. These stories are not just entertainment, they are a form of oral history, a way of passing down the wisdom and the warnings of the trail. They are the unwritten scriptures of this hard land. You listen, enraptured, to these epic poems of dust and danger, the words painting vivid pictures in the dim, smoky air. The third, and most dangerous, defense is cruelty. The bunkhouse is a pressure cooker of masculine anxiety, of unspoken fears and frustrations, and that pressure is often released in the form of practical jokes, of relentless teasing, of a verbal hazing of the younger, weaker members of the crew. You are a target. They will hide your boots, forcing you to search for them in the freezing dark. They might put a dead snake or a large hairy spider in your bedroll, waiting in silence for your inevitable shout of alarm. They will give you a nickname, something embarrassing and impossible to shake, a brand that marks you as the lowest on the totem pole. It is not good-natured fun. It is a form of social Darwinism, a way for the strong to assert their dominance over the weak, to remind everyone of their place. You learn to take it in silence, to patch your pride, to show no weakness, to never, ever let them see that they have gotten to you. To react with anger is to lose. To react with tears is to be destroyed. Here's a peculiar fringe fact from the social world of the cowboy, a truth you absorb through observation. The bunkhouse had its own strict, unwritten code of conduct. For all the roughness there were lines. A man was expected to be clean, at least by the low standards of the time, and not foul the shared air more than necessary. He was not to touch another man's gear, his saddle, his gun, his bedroll without permission, and he was expected to contribute to the pot, a communal fund for buying books or magazines for the whole crew to share. A man who violated this code would be ostracized, given the silent treatment, a punishment that in this close-knit, isolated world was often worse than a physical beating. And then there is the music. In nearly every bunkhouse there is a man with an instrument, a battered harmonica, a scarred fiddle, or a guitar with a missing string. When the stories have been told and the jokes have worn thin, one of these men will retrieve his instrument. The music they play is not the cheerful, foot-stomping music of a barn dance. It is the sad, mournful, and deeply melancholic music of the cowboy. They sing songs of lost love, of distant homes they will never see again, of friends buried on the trail. Songs like "Bury Me Not on the Lone Prairie," with its plea against an anonymous grave, or "The Streets of Laredo," the lament of a dying young cowboy. The music is a rare and precious outlet for all the emotion, the sorrow, the loneliness, that the cowboy code forbids them from expressing in any other way. You lie in your cold bunk, in the near darkness, and you listen to the sad, sweet sound of a fiddle. The melody weaves through the snores and the coughs, a thin thread of beauty in the coarse tapestry of the bunkhouse. It is a sound that speaks of the deep, hidden heart of the cowboy, a heart that is not hard or cold or violent as the world demands it to be, but a heart that is filled with a profound and unspoken sadness, a longing for a softness that this life will never allow. The bunkhouse is a strange and contradictory world. It is a place of fierce camaraderie and of casual cruelty, of soul-crushing boredom and of sudden, violent excitement, of silent, stoic men and of heartbreakingly sad music. It is a microcosm of the West itself, a place of immense hardship that forges an unbreakable, if unspoken bond between those who endure it. It is not a home, but for the long, cold and lonely months of the winter, it is the only one you have. It is your refuge, your prison, your family. And you survive it, as you survive everything else in this world, with a quiet, patient and deeply weary endurance, learning your place in the society of men as you learned your place in the white darkness of the plains. There is a third path for the cowboy in winter. It is the path of the man who finds no work, who has no place at a ranch headquarters, who is left to face the cold alone, not in the wilderness, but on the fringes of the very civilization he has helped to build. This is the life of the winter drifter, and it is a life of pure, desperate, and often fatal survival. You have become this man. Perhaps you were too late in seeking a winter job. Perhaps you were fired from an outfit for a mistake or an insult. Perhaps you simply do not have the temperament for the claustrophobic hell of the bunkhouse. So you drift. You move from town to town, a ghost in a worn-out coat. Your only possessions the few dollars in your pocket and the bedroll on your back. You are searching for an odd job, a day's labor, anything that will earn you enough money for a hot meal and a place to sleep out of the wind. Your home is the livery stable. It is the only place in town that will offer a man shelter for a few cents a night. You do not get a room. You get a patch of hay in the loft, a space you share with a dozen other broke, desperate men. The livery stable is cold. The wind whistles through the cracks in the walls. But it is warmer than the street, and it has the animal warmth of the horses in the stalls below. You lie in the hay, the smell of horse and manure a strange, almost comforting perfume. You listen to the soft sounds of the animals, the shifting of their hooves, their gentle snorting, and you are grateful for this small, temporary refuge. Your days are a constant, humiliating search for work. You stand on street corners, hoping a merchant or a homeowner will need a man to shovel snow, to chop wood, to do any menial task. You are competing with a dozen other men just like you. The work is scarce, and the pay is pitiful. You are a cowboy, a man of skill, of pride, and you are reduced to begging for the chance to shovel a rich man's walkway for a dime. Hunger is your constant companion. The few coins you earn go to buy a plate of beans, a loaf of stale bread. You learn to be invisible, to slip into the back of a saloon and stand by the free lunch counter, stuffing yourself with the salty food, trying to eat enough to last you through the day. The bartender watches you with a look of contempt, but he does not throw you out. He knows that desperation is a part of the local economy. Here's a harsh fringe fact from the social landscape of the West. Vagrancy was a crime in many frontier towns. A man with no job and no visible means of support could be arrested, fined, or even sentenced to a term of hard labor. For the winter drifter, the line between being a down-on-his-luck cowboy and being a criminal was dangerously thin. The local sheriff is not your friend, he is your enemy. The cold is a predator that is always stalking you. You do not have the proper winter gear of a line rider. Your coat is thin. Your boots have holes in them. You stuff them with newspaper to try and keep out the snow. You spend your days trying to stay warm. You stand for hours in the blacksmith shop, soaking up the heat from his forge. You sit in the back of the general store, near the pot-bellied stove, until the owner tells you to move along. You learn the geography of public warmth, the places where a man can linger for an hour without being chased away. And at night, if you cannot afford the few cents for a bed in the livery stable, you must find other shelter. An abandoned shed, the sheltered space under a loading dock. You become an expert in the architecture of survival. The greatest danger is the temptation to give up. The cold, the hunger, the constant humiliation, they wear you down. You see other drifters, their faces hollow with despair, their eyes empty. They have surrendered. They sit in alleys, wrapped in rags, a bottle of cheap whiskey their only companion. They are just waiting to die. You see the town's respectable citizens walk past them, their faces averted. They do not want to see this ugly, inconvenient reality. They do not want to be reminded of how thin the line is between a comfortable home and a frozen gutter. You are terrified of becoming one of them. And so you fight. You fight for every odd job. You endure every insult. You hoard every penny. You are fighting not just for your body, but for your soul. You are fighting to hold on to the last, tattered remnants of your own pride, your own sense of self. One night, the temperature plummets. It is a brutal, killing cold. The livery stable is full. You have nowhere to go. You find a small, sheltered alley between two buildings. You unroll your bedroll. You wrap yourself in every layer of clothing you have. You lie down in the snow, your body curled into a tight, shivering ball. You know that this could be your last night. You know that you might not wake up in the morning. You close your eyes. You do not pray. You do not think about your past. You just focus on the small, flickering flame of your own life, and you try, with every ounce of your will, to keep it from going out. You are a drifter, a ghost haunting the edges of a prosperous town. You are the forgotten man of the West, the one whose story is never told. You are the embodiment of the failure of the frontier dream. But you are also a survivor. You have been stripped of everything but your own stubborn will to live. And as you lie in your frozen bed, you make a silent promise to yourself. You will see the sunrise. You will not let the cold win. Not tonight. The winter does not end. It breaks. It shatters like a pane of ice. Not all at once, but in a series of slow, agonizing cracks. For you, the cowboy who has endured the frozen season, the coming of spring is not a gentle, poetic awakening. It is a messy, painful, and deeply ambivalent process of coming back to life. If you were a line rider, the first sign of the thaw is the sound of water, the drip, drip, drip of melting snow from the roof of your cabin. It is a sound you have not heard in months, a sound that is so filled with promise it is almost a form of music. The world begins to transform. The vast, white, silent landscape begins to show its bones. Patches of brown earth appear. The creeks, which were frozen solid, begin to flow again, a muddy, turbulent rush of life. But the thaw is also a time of great danger. The melting snow turns the prairie into a vast, impassable swamp. The rivers, swollen with meltwater, become raging torrents. The ground, which was once hard and reliable, is now a treacherous, muddy bog that can suck a horse down to its belly. Your isolation is not over, it is just different. You are trapped not by snow, but by mud, and your body begins to protest the change. The aches and pains that were numbed by the cold now return with a vengeance. Your frostbitten toes throb with a new, fiery life. The chilblains on your fingers itch and burn. You are engaged in the hard, wet, and miserable work of the spring roundup. You ride through the mud, searching for the cattle that have survived the winter. They are thin and weak and mean-tempered. But there is a new feeling in the air too, a feeling of hope. The sun is warmer, the days are longer. The first, tentative shoots of green grass are beginning to appear. You see a flock of migrating birds, a high, lonely V against the vast blue sky. And your own heart, which has been a frozen, dormant thing for months, begins to thaw too. If you were a drifter in the town, the thaw brings a different kind of change. It brings work. The ranches are hiring again for the spring branding. The freight companies need men to drive their wagons over the now passable roads. The town begins to stir, to wake from its long winter slumber. You get a real job, with a real wage. You eat a hot meal, a meal you have paid for with your own labor. You sleep in a real bed, in a bunkhouse, surrounded by the familiar, comforting noise of other men. The simple, profound luxury of it is almost overwhelming. Here's a poignant fringe fact about the seasonal cycle of the cowboy. The spring was a time of intense social and economic activity. The towns would fill up with cowboys who had just been paid for a trail drive or who were looking for work for the summer. It was a time of renewal, of optimism, of a belief that this year things would be different. But the thaw is also a time of reckoning. The winter has taken its toll. You look at the faces of the other cowboys. They are all survivors, but they are all scarred. Some have lost fingers or toes to frostbite. Some have a deep, rattling cough that will never leave them. And all of them have a new, quiet and haunted look in their eyes. They have been to a dark, lonely place, and they have brought a piece of it back with them. The land itself reveals its winter secrets. As the snow melts, it uncovers the bodies of the cattle that did not survive. It uncovers the bodies of the travelers who were caught in a blizzard. It uncovers the unmarked graves of the drifters who froze to death in a lonely alley. Spring in the West is not just a season of rebirth, it is a season of exhumation, a time when the land gives up its dead, but it is also a time of profound and deeply earned relief. You stand on the prairie, the soft spring wind on your face. The earth smells of life, of wet soil, of new grass. You take off your hat and you let the sun warm your skin. You close your eyes, and you feel a sense of gratitude so profound it is a physical sensation. You have survived. You have faced the worst that this world can throw at you. You have endured the cold, the hunger, the loneliness, the fear, and you are still here. You are not a hero. You are not a legend. You are just a man, a tired and scarred and profoundly weary man. But you are a man who has looked into the heart of the winter darkness and has lived to see the spring. And in this moment, on this vast, green and beautiful prairie, that feels like the greatest and most glorious victory of all, the long, cold and lonely winter of your soul is finally over. The seasons turn. You ride another trail drive, and another. You winter in another line shack, in another bunkhouse. The years begin to blur, to pile up like layers of dust on an old saddle. You are no longer the young greenhorn. You are the old-timer now, the one with the stories, the one with the scars. And you are haunted. You are haunted by the ghosts of the winters you have survived. They ride with you, a silent, invisible posse of memories. You are haunted by the ghost of the cold. You will never feel truly, deeply warm again. Even on the hottest summer day, you can feel a faint, phantom chill in your bones, a memory of the killing cold that you once lived with as a constant companion. You find yourself piling extra blankets on your bed, even in July. You huddle close to the campfire, soaking up its heat with a desperate, greedy intensity. You are haunted by the ghost of the hunger. You will never take a hot meal for granted again. You eat with a kind of quiet, wolfish urgency, as if you are afraid that the food will be snatched away from you. You cannot bear to see food wasted. You will clean your plate, and the plates of the men around you, with a grim, methodical efficiency. You are haunted by the ghost of the loneliness. You have learned to live with your own company. You have become a man of silence, of solitude. But the loneliness has left its mark. You are awkward in crowds. You are uncomfortable with loud noises, with easy chatter. You have forgotten the simple, casual art of human connection. You are a man who is more at home with the silence of the prairie than with the noise of a town. And you are haunted by the ghosts of the men who did not survive. The men who froze in their bedrolls, who starved in their cabins, who lost their minds in the white darkness. Their faces visit you in your dreams. You see them, their eyes filled with a quiet, pleading question. Why you? Why did you survive, and we did not? It is a question you cannot answer. There is no logic to survival in the West. There is only luck and endurance and the random, indifferent turning of the wheel. Here's a final, poignant fringe fact about the later lives of cowboys. Many of them suffered from chronic health problems related to their years of exposure and poor nutrition. Arthritis, respiratory problems, and digestive ailments were common, and many more suffered from the psychological scars of their life alcoholism, depression, and a profound inability to settle down and adapt to a more civilized world. They were a generation of men who were used up by the West and then discarded. You have become a ghost in a changing world. The open range is gone. The great trail drives are a thing of the past. The West is being filled up, fenced in, civilized. The life you knew, the only life you were ever good at, is a memory. You are a man out of time. You are too wild for the towns, too broken for the wilderness. You end your days on a small, dusty patch of land, a pension from a cattle company that has long since forgotten your name. You sit on the porch of a small cabin, and you watch the world go by. The young people of the new generation look at you, and they see a hero. They see the myth. They see the strong, silent, free-spirited man of the open range. They do not see the truth. They do not see the fear, the pain, the loneliness. They do not see the long, dark nights of the soul that you spent in a frozen dugout, fighting for your life and your sanity. They do not see the ghosts that ride with you, the silent companions of your old age. You are the last survivor of a forgotten war, a war against the winter, a war that was fought not with guns but with blankets and fires, and a stubborn, quiet, and deeply human will to live. As you drift now into your final, quiet sleep, let the ghosts of the winter prairie find their peace. The cold is gone, the hunger is gone, the loneliness is over, the long, hard ride is finished. Let the image of the cowboy be not the hero on the movie screen, but the quiet, bundled figure, riding a slow circle around a sleeping herd, his voice a low, sad murmur against the vast, cold, and silent darkness of the winter night. Let him, at last, be warm. Let him, at last, be home.